It is Monday, March 29th, 2021, and this is the iPhoneography Podcast. Hello everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Greg McMillan, and with me is my co-host and good friend, Dave Podner. Hello, Dave.
Hey Greg, how's it going today?
It's not going too bad. We had a nice sunny day here, so can't complain. A little cool, but sunny, so that's good. How about you?
Of course, as I'm doing good. I had a conversation with someone from Southern California last week, and I said, "Oh, it's great here. It's nice and warm. We're in the mid 50s, and it's wonderful." He said, and he was like, "If it's below 60, we're bundled up like it's winter out here."
That wasn't your father, was it?
No.
Oh.
Even though he is like that, yeah. Because he is in the desert in Southern California. And when they hit weather that's in the 60s Fahrenheit, they're like, it's cold. I need long pants on. I need a light jacket, and you're probably very similar. It's like, 50-degree weather, that's shorts weather.
Yeah. Well, you know what? There's a guy that lives up the street from me here. And folks, I am in Canada. I'm a couple of hours north of Toronto. And it could be minus 20 degrees Celsius, whatever that is in Fahrenheit, but it's below 0 Fahrenheit. And he will walk along the street with shorts on. He'll have a winter coat on, hat, mitts, all that stuff, but he will wear shorts every day of the year. And I think the man is crazy.
Let's say.
Go ahead.
Okay. He just got that thick blood.
I guess so. Maybe he's just a real true Canadian. I don't know. But anyway, so tonight we are going to go back to the basics. Like a few shows ago, we talked about contrast and how it works and doesn't work and whatnot in photography. And this week, so earlier today, I saw a Twitter post by Sebastian DeWitt from the team at Halide, and he posted two images, one from his wide-angle camera on his iPhone 12 Pro Max, I think it was, and the other image was from the telephoto camera. And he says the telephoto is his favorite one on the iPhone. And somebody had put a comment on there about cropping. Like, why not just crop the wide angle photo to get, the same thing that the telephoto would give you? And I got looking at the two images that Sebastian put on, and then this fellow put on a crop version of the wide angle photo. And the quality just wasn't there. So we'll get into that, in all this stuff we're going to talk about. But when I fired a text off to Dave, I said, well, what should we talk about tonight? And so he thought, well, maybe we should go back to the basics again. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. So cropping a photo is basically one of the basics. And we are going to discuss that tonight. So I guess we should start, Dave, by saying what is cropping, because anybody that's new to photography may or may not have heard the term before, and we'll start with that. So, Dave, in your mind, what is cropping?
Well, to me now, there's a difference between thinking in terms of film camera and what we deal with the iPhone. Mm-hmm. It's more of cutting to a size. Sometimes it could be cutting off pieces that you're not wanting, or cutting to a particular size, where at least with the older iPhones, you're limited in terms of the ratios, either a square or a 4:3 shot, where I think the 12s and the 12 Maxes, you can actually shoot in the native camera app in 16:9, correct?
Yes, and I think you can do that with the 10S as well.
Okay.
Just open the camera.
But the 10 you cannot, I can tell you, because I have the 10.
Right. This started in
So-
the 10S because my 10S Max
Okay.
has that ability. So
Okay. So if you want to have like a wide shot, not necessarily panoramic, just a nice wide shot, you can't, unless you want to use a third party app, you're going to take a shot and cut off kind of the top and the bottom. So you're going to frame it a little differently. So now that's one way of cropping. That's the one that I try to use more than the other crop. Just because, if you see a scene in your eye and you're like, oh, that's so great in that. But if it's more of a square-ish, like the 4x3, which is the built-in, the native camera app that you're using, let's say you take it in 4x3 and you're like, well, I just want to cut a little bit off the top, a little bit off the bottom, make it a little bit wider, get a more expansive feel to it. But I think the one that Sebastian person replied to with the crop his way was using crop as almost like a zoom.
yeah. So we'll get into the intricacies of it, but to basically define cropping, I guess the best way to put it is to just remove parts of an image, from the outside edges of the frame. Would that be a fair statement?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I would think that's fair. Removing bits from the film that, and if you want, like I said, if you think back to the old time when you actually had physical film, it's literally either probably not doing the of course I never developed in my hands, but even taking a developed photo and then getting a paper cutter and start slicing off little bits here and there to make it a certain shape, or cut off, oh, I don't like how that little bit is like on the right side, I can just chop it off and it won't be distracting over there.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So that kind of gets into why we would want to crop an image, to get rid of any unnecessary parts of the frame, make it more aesthetically pleasing, kind of improve the composition, that type of thing. And, when it comes to photography, like photos oftentimes will tell a story. So giving it the right crop could give it that ability to tell that story. So what we'll do is we'll get into some do's and don'ts about cropping. And that's where we can come back to some of these points that you just mentioned here. Mm-hmm. So I'll start with a couple of the do's here. So you want to have, say you have a photo of a child playing with a ball, and the ball is coming towards the child and the child is about to catch that ball. Well, you want to leave your room in that photo to be able to tell that story. So what you want to, if you want to crop a little bit off the image, make sure you leave the important parts of the frame intact, like the child and the ball. Otherwise, if you cropped off the ball and you see this kid just holding his hands out with this great big smile on his face, you really don't know what's going on. So basically, leave room in your photo to tell the story. So that's one thing that you really want to kind of do. You want to remember to do that. Another thing to remember to do is that you can crop for cosmetic reasons. Now, I should say that some of these points were taken from a website, and let me go back and see if I could find that. I'll put the link to this in the show notes. It's a website called companyfolders.com, and it's an article called 15 Easy Tips for Cropping Photos Like a Pro by Vladimir Gendelman, and it's from September of 2015. So I was just doing a search on cropping and whatnot, and I come across this article, and it was really, really informative with photos and everything. So do go to the show notes on the website and check out this article. And that's where I'm getting a lot of this stuff from. So, credit goes to Mr. Gendelman for all this. But for cropping for cosmetic reasons is like if you got a stain or a wrinkle on your shirt that you don't want to have in the image, crop just enough to get rid of that. As long as you're left with a pleasing image, then you should be fine. It's a lot better than not cropping, and having like an ink stain from a pen or something, a leaky pen on your shirt. Nobody wants that. Another do is, let's say you're doing a model shoot and you want to do, or even this could be landscape shots, it could be anything. But if you're doing a series of photos, and if you need to do crops, make sure the crops are consistent for the set. Because if, say, it's a model shoot and you want to crop 3 different images of a model, you want to make sure that the crops are all done relatively the same. Because like, you don't want the head of the model way up high in one picture, way down low in another picture, and in the middle of another one, because that just wouldn't look pleasing at all when you're looking at a series of photos, like say 3 pictures hanging on the wall beside each other. So keep your crops consistent. Experiment with different crops. Now, Dave, you want to touch on this one, because this is where you were getting into aspect ratios and shapes and stuff.
Right, and there's one nice thing that you can do with in the built-in Photos app. If you click on the bottom right, and this is something I like to do when I'm going to try something, and it may or may not work out. But once you're in a photo, on the bottom left, where you would use that to send a photo to someone or print it out, if you scroll down, you can duplicate it.
Right.
So what you can. So then I would say, if you're going to try to experiment with like crops or edits, duplicate it. Even though I know they're non-destructive edits and you can always go all the way back, it's always nice to have not only the original, but to think that, well, I like both edits. I like it this way and this way. So when I'm going to try, if I think I'm going to try something that's kind of unusual, or, even like cropping a different size, I'll duplicate it first, work on the duplicate. And if I really don't like it, I can just trash it and no problem. Or, or let's say you're doing an edit on it so far in terms of maybe the coloration or the contrast, and you just want to look and see what 2 different aspect ratios are like.
Yeah.
Duplicate it then, and that way you can compare the 2. And because if you're doing your editing in the built-in Photos app, you can't just simply step back one.
No, that's right.
You can revert all the way, but that loses, let's say, some of the color and some of the sharpness editing that you may want to do, and then it gets aggravating because you have to redo work.
That's
and you don't want to be aggravated. It's supposed to be fun.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple times where I've taken shots along the river where I definitely wanted a more sweeping look to it than a square shot. So I'll take the shot as, 4x3, and then and the nice thing is, if you take the bigger shot, you can say, well, I want to cut off just this. The sky's nice, but there's no interest in it. Nothing's really going on. I want to cut off the sky and leave more in the foreground. Or you could say, well, the sky is very expressive. The color's just wonderful on here. So what I'm going to do is cut off more of the foreground, because maybe there's some rocks there that aren't too interesting looking, but you want to keep the sky, so you can crop it that way. And if you don't necessarily want to keep it 16:9, just the standard wide, you could do different aspect ratio, or just do it freehand to get the feel you want for it.
Yep.
So, and like I say, that's now the one thing about cropping for cosmetic reasons. The one thing that's really, and I, like I said, you said that was from 2015, right?
Yes.
Is that there's less of a reason to do that these days with the different apps that can fix minor issues.
That's a good point, yeah.
I'm thinking like Touch Retouch.
Yeah,
where if there's a stain, or I've actually had it with flares. Sun flares, where the little ball flare, not the nice, sun ray type flare, but just like the little greenish ball that shows up.
Oh, yeah.
Or, there's a rock with graffiti on the bottom right, and I want to get rid of the graffiti, but I don't want to change the aspect ratio. I don't want to change the feel for it. You can go in there and just kind of go, okay, that's all gone then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Without having to invest into knowing Photoshop because that's not easy.
That's right.
I know people who are good at it make it look easy because it's a lot of hard work and practice.
Yeah, and Snapseed has a good healing tool in it too, for the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say, I mean, in terms of a lot of it's just a matter of in my mind, what the image I have when I'm taking the photo versus what comes out of the phone too.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we talk about experimenting with different crops, like, different aspect ratios and stuff like that, I mean, there's shapes too. Like some apps will let you crop in a circle or a heart. There's just whatever, just depends on what you plan to use the image for. Like if you want to use it for an avatar or something like that, you can use a circle. And, if you want to, print out something for a Valentine's card, you can do it a heart shape. So there's, lots of different ideas there. So another thing in the do list is, crop in tight to add mood or drama to the image. So this works well with people photos. Like if you have a picture of a child or a person with a, kind of a stern look on their face, you might want to get rid of some of that background, just kind of hone in on the person, and let that look on their face kind of stand out a little bit more. Too much of the background could be distracting. So use a crop to give it mood or to add drama. And the final one I've got listed on the do side is use moderation when cropping. Sometimes a little bit can go a long way. And like Dave said, when you're working on an image, duplicate it. That way you can try little bits at a time and kind of track your changes as you go, type of thing. And then if you don't like it, well, then you can throw that one away and make another duplicate or just revert it or do whatever. But just kind of, take baby steps when you're just starting to crop. And, you never know, you might like just taking a little bit off the top or something like that. So anything else on the do side, Dave, that you can think of? Like things that you would encourage someone to do?
No, I think that handles most of it. Like I said, it's the one nice thing, and this is the change from a couple years ago, is non-destructive edits, where it isn't a matter of, I cropped that and I cropped too tightly. Now because as I was kind of mentioning, cropping can be kind of a way to do digital zoom, a crude way of doing digital zoom that when you do digital zoom, you lose image quality. And there are times where I couldn't physically get closer trying to get to an image. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's kind of pixelated, or, it kind of lost its image. And the fact you can now zoom out and get back to what it was before, versus, I guess I just ruined the image.
Yeah. And I used to encourage that a lot. Rather than digital zoom, I would always tell people to just take it from the regular camera, get the best quality you can, and then just crop. And you'd have to settle with a smaller file with regards to resolution, but at least your image quality is going to be a little better. So before we get into the don'ts, let's elaborate on that, Dave. Let's talk a little bit more about crop versus zoom. You put some things in the notes here about that, and give us your thoughts on one versus the other. Like, just kind of elaborate on it more.
Yeah. So a lot of times, now this may change depending on what iPhone you have, also, because Apple has made the zoom. Or if let's say you're using a different camera, it depends on the specifications on the different zoom lenses. Because at one time, the zoom lens was significantly worse than than the standard lens, especially in terms of low light. Mm-hmm. Low light, it was the biggest difference because you were like, oh, it's half dark in here, and trying to use the 2x completely ruined the image. We're doing a 1x because the light was better, its light sensing was better. Cropping it to match the 2x, it would still be. And the one thing the iPhone does, if it doesn't think you have enough light to use the 2x lens, it'll just do a digital zoom on the 1x.
Right.
And if you use the native camera app, it does. Oh yeah. Which, that's part of machine learning. That's part of the positive part of machine learning. The negative is you lose control, but you can always use a third-party app like Camera Plus or probably Halide you can select.
Yep. I think just about any third-party one, you can do that.
Yeah, you can say, oh, I want 2x, but I want to make sure I'm using the 2x, or if you want to zoom out, you want to use the extra wide, the half x, you can say, I want to use that, not just zoom out.
Yeah.
So, but there are times where I was back when we could go to arenas or places and see live performances. I wanted to zoom in and get, someone on stage, and I was far enough back. Well, I tried doing the zoom, but it was, of course, you're in an indoor arena or like an indoor stage. The lighting's not great because, of course, they're lighting it for you to view, not for you to take a picture.
Yeah,
understandable. That's right. Now, like I said, this changes with the 12 and the 12 Max is that they made the telephoto lens, especially on the Max, a lot better with the stabilization being the lens, the optical stabilization on the Max telephoto versus the 11 even. It was just made a huge difference. So again, you have to see this is where you sometimes have to dig into the technical specifications or at least play with it enough to know what you're dealing with your particular. I know on my 10, if I try to do like video when it's a little dark or photos when it's a little dark, is that I could tell the degradation using the zoom versus the 1x, or when it says, oh, we're sorry, we're going to override you and we're going to tell you what's best, as Apple tends to do now. That's, again, everyone, I don't want to say it's a good thing, bad thing. It's just a positive, negative you have to think about the control. And I would say also a lot. The one difference between, at least for any modern, and I'm thinking in the last probably 3 or 4 years or so, iPhone crop versus zoom, digital. I'm talking digital zoom, not optical. Yeah, is that in the past it was pretty much the same thing. So if you have an iPhone 4S or a 5, and you did cropping versus the digital zoom, it pretty much it was a stupid digital zoom at the time. Now, because of the machine learning, when you do digital zoom, it's trying to interpolate and extrapolate points and smooth things out. So it's better than just cropping it.
And it has that extra camera too. Whereas back before the 7, they only had one camera to try to zoom with. Exactly.
And what Apple's trying to do, and I'm a little more familiar with Apple, so Android phones may also do similar things, is it will use some parts from the 1X, some parts from the 2X, I guess some from the half, but I don't think it uses that so much. But it's a lot of times if you digitally zoom in, let's say 3X, to get the zoom level you want, the camera will actually look at images that are brought in from both the 2.5 and the 1X and merge them together for which pixels are the best.
Yeah, and I think the way it does it is,
which is crazy.
Oh, I know. Like, whoever thought of this is brilliant. But I think the way it works is it takes the bulk of the image area from the 2X and the central area from the 1X, because it's going to be better image quality. and melds the two together somehow with all its machine learning and computational stuff. But I think another thing that helps the improvement as the years go on is the aperture of the 2X camera. It's been getting better and better. I think it started in the 7 with I think it was like a f2.8 aperture, and it from the set, and then from the 8 plus, I think it might have went to a 2.4, and the 10 would be a 2.4. Then I think the 11 went from, I think it was a 2.2, and now in the 12 it might be. I think in the 12 Pro it's f2. In the 12 Pro Max, it's f2.2. So that change in aperture over the years has helped improve the quality, along with the stabilization and all that stuff. So,
right.
It's just going to get better.
Oh yeah, and the one other thing to remember is not only did the aperture for the light gathering change, mm-hmm. but the focal length changed a little bit too.
Yeah.
So you also have to, when we're talking about the difference between cropping and zooming, you may like how, let's say, the focal length in the 1X makes an image look versus, in your case, the 2.5 or my case, a 2 zoom,
right,
makes that look because of the difference on how the focal length is and how the foreground and background come together and the mm-hmm. different perspective each will give, whether you want a flatter or deeper looking photo. And
right. Yeah.
One nice thing, and this is, I know, true with all digital camera, but iPhone makes it a little bit easier because of how quickly the photos are taken. It's not that hard to say, okay, I'm going to take one photo this way, then I'm going to back up, I'm going to hit the zoom button to go 2.5 or 2, depending on what camera you have. And I'm going to get I'm going to frame it the same. And I might take that picture and see which one I like better. You may like one or the other better. And after experimenting, you may say, well, if I want an up-close subject, I'd rather go with the 1X than the 2.5 because it gives me better depth of field and it gives me more of a natural look versus I know when they went to portrait mode and they expanded it out so more than just one lens can do portrait mode. Mm-hmm. Like I think you can do it, and if you have 3 lenses, you can do it both on the ultra wide and what they consider the wide lens, the 1X.
Portrait mode?
Am I right? Or am I? Yeah, portrait mode. You should be like. And I'm sorry. Like when I do portrait mode, it uses the 2X lens as the primary.
Oh yeah, I can do it with the 1 times and with
you
the 2.5.
You can do it with 1 or 2. Okay, 1 or
yeah.
Okay, and I was going the wrong direction. But which if I have to do portrait mode, I have to back up.
Yes,
because it uses the 2X.
Right.
So that is in terms of also cropping cropping versus zoom. If you want to use the portrait mode and you have the option, it's not just a matter of zoom, but it's a matter of an overall field difference versus the 1 versus 2.5 or the 2 lens.
Yeah. And you know what? So I totally forgot that this. Yeah, I totally forgot that this phone had that capability to do it with the 1 times camera. I don't use portrait mode a whole lot. I mean, when it first came out, it was in the 7, but I didn't have it till I had the 8 plus. And boy, oh boy, I used it a lot back then, but I just haven't used it too much lately. But I might have to play around with that some more. So that's a good little discussion on just crop versus zoom, because sometimes one has merits over the other, and there are times when the other has the merits over the first one. So, some good points there. So now we'll get into some don'ts about cropping, and I'll start with the first one here. It says, don't center the subject when you're cropping. So if you have like a picture of your dog, or better yet, a close up of a person where their head or their face is the main part of the image. You don't want to crop it so that it's right in the center of the frame. I mean, there may be a time for that artistic approach, but in general, you might want to leave, like, okay, say the person is looking over to the one side. Well, you want to crop it so that person is looking into the frame. You don't want to crop it in the middle, because then it just looks weird to me anyway.
Yeah. And like you said, there are artistic reasons. Again, all these rules. There's no such thing. I hate to say, there's no such thing as a hard and fast rule with anything.
Oh yeah,
because I know there are people who do artistic who are just centering the faces right on someone or looking straight ahead, and it's very striking. But a lot of times, for the most part, it's a matter of, like you said, and I'm stealing from Joe here from Tiny Shutter. There's a tension involved when you don't have it in the middle.
Yes.
Even if it's like the main thing, there's not something bouncing it off on the other side. It's still, and the rule of thirds is not a hard and fast rule. It's just something that a lot of people think after doing photos over the years is like, oh, there's just something, and a lot of times you can't put your finger on it. There's just something nicer about having it off center a bit.
Yeah. Like, I mean, watch any TV show or movie when they're showing people. Those people are never dead center of the screen. They're always off to the one side. Yeah, so that's a good thing to remember. So another point is, when you do crop, kind of keep in mind the rule of thirds in the result that you want to get. So a good thing to remember there with that is, okay, so let's go back to the picture of a person again, whether they're looking at you or looking to the side or whatever, but you want their eyes, say, to be at the point where two of the rule of thirds lines would intersect in the kind of towards the corner of the frame. I know this is kind of hard to visualize, but that would put their eyes or the center of their face or whatever just a third of the way into the frame. This is after you crop. So a third of the way into the frame from one side, and a third of the way, say, down from the top. And if you do that, I think you would be more pleased than if you didn't. Like if you put them in the center, or too far one way, or too high, too low. There's just something pleasing about that rule of thirds, and I mean, that's why it was invented. So kind of keep that in mind keep that kind of rule of thirds thing in your mind. What it would look like after you crop that out. Another thing is, don't cut limbs off at the joints, because that hurts. And I mean, okay, so if you got a picture of a person and they're kind of shrugging, say, for example, and their hands are up in the air, you don't want to crop in so that just their hands are missing, because that kind of looks odd for one, and it would kind of maybe leave you to wonder, okay, well, why is the hand cut off? If you wanted to do a crop like that, crop in much closer to the point where maybe you don't even know what their arms are doing, but it doesn't matter because you're cropping in close enough to get like a headshot type style of image. Or if you got a whole person, top to bottom, the whole body there, don't crop just the feet off. Crop, up at the thighs or at the shin, or even at the torso. It's much more pleasing than just a picture. If a photo with just, say, the feet taken off looks like it was just poorly taken. And, it's better to either leave them on or crop up much further. What do you think?
No, agreed. Now, the one, and a total agreement that if you just cut like literally above the eyes off of someone,
oh yeah,
it just looks weird. Now, there is one exception. Our lieutenant governor in Pennsylvania, John Fetterman. It started as a gag when his wife was taking a photo of him and his wife.
Oh, yeah.
I should say Fetterman, I believe, is 6'6".
Oh.
So he's a very tall person. His wife is mid 5 foot something. So he's well over a foot taller than her. And you can imagine trying to get photos, a full body shot.
Yeah.
Have issues.
Yeah, for sure.
And there was one shot, and she was kidding afterwards, saying, well, I had some really cute shoes on. I wanted to make sure they were in the shot. So the shot was taken and the top of his hip was cut off.
Ah.
And it turned into a running gag that anytime there'd be a picture of those two together, his head would always be chopped off halfway.
Yeah, and that's the next point. Don't cut too much of the person's head off, because
right.
You just want, if you want to take just a whisper off the top, that's fine, but show the hairstyle, or if they're bald, show most of the head. You don't want to cut, like you say, Dave, right above the eyebrows type of thing. Yeah, it's just not very good.
Yeah, and their situation's kind of the exception that proves the rule. It works for them because it is an inside joke.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
It is a joke. They weren't trying to be overly serious, and it was just a matter of they ran with it and it just caught on. But just because you see, here's someone who does something and it works for them, that's kind of the exception. I mean, if I never want to tell anyone don't do that, but, it probably will look better if you include, if you need to chop something off, chop it off. Like you said, not just at the very top of the head or the bottom of the feet, because then it looks just like you just didn't frame it well. Yeah,
that's right. And, this is all subjective. We'll kind of summarize with that. But the last point kind of goes back to a point you mentioned near the beginning of the show. When you said you were taking a photo of a river and you took the sky right out of the frame, you cut the sky right off. And that would work for that image. But if you're doing a landscape photo of, say a mountain scene or something like that, you don't want to cut the horizon line off then, because, I think that would just ruin the image, in my opinion. Again, it's subjective, but what kind of the rule is there is, if you want more of the sky, like say there's some nice clouds, then put the horizon line down at the lower third line. If you want to show more foreground and less sky, then put that horizon line at the upper third line. Again, there's that rule of thirds, and the iPhone has in the native camera app has a rule of thirds grid that you can activate. It may even be on by default, I'm not sure. But that is invaluable in composing an image. But if you take a shot that's too wide or whatever, and you do want to crop it, then kind of keep that in mind. Put the horizon line at the upper third or the lower third, or if the image calls for it, you could put it right dead in the middle. I've done that myself a few times, and it seemed to work out. Oh, that's that wireless doorbell of yours, eh?
Yep. Or more than likely a cat just ran across and they're trying, or we have a bunny in the backyard.
Oh yeah. Our dog lights up when she sees them too. So I mean, cropping, it's a subjective thing when it comes to your artistic vision, and it is, I think maybe we might have made it sound somewhat complex with all the different things about it, but I think it's still one of the basic fundamentals of photography, and it has been probably since the beginning. So, any final thoughts on cropping, Dave? Like anything at all?
No, I would say the biggest thing, and this is something I I may say enough that people are getting a little sick of it, but experiment.
Yes.
And like I said, if you want to, just because you don't want to possibly lose maybe an edit that you're working on, go so far, duplicate it and say, okay, now I'm going to play with this one and leave this one for now, and I'll come back to it if I don't like where I go from. It's kind of literally, if you're into video games, hit that save point.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't have to go all the way back to the beginning. You can just go halfway back. Big difference there. And like I said, it's more of a matter of, a lot of times when I'm taking photos, I'll see an image and I'm like, it's like, wow, this is here, or I like that view, or I like how this turned out. And I'll have an idea in my head on what I want to see.
Yeah.
And part of that is not only the color and the contrast, but it's also the crop. Mm-hmm. Like you said, it's a matter of, sometimes you want to have more of a square crop to hang on, what's going on in the scene, or more of a sweeping wide. And, give it a try and see what matches. You may actually, and don't say, well, I have a 16:9, I have a 2:3, I have a 4:6, I have this. You can do whatever crop you want.
Oh, yeah.
So if you want to start with the standard and then start adjusting afterwards, go for it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that's what, could make or break an image. Like, it just depends on what it calls for. So, I couldn't agree more with you, Dave. Just play around with it, experiment, try different things, and, eventually it'll be like just part of your workflow that you don't even think about. You just do it and it's done. And I guess the only thing that I would add to that is, before you start adjusting, light and contrast and things like that, crop first, because if you're anything like me, I use the histogram a lot when it comes to edits. And by cropping out, say there's a real bright part of an image that you don't want in there, if you crop that out, it's going to alter how the histogram reads going forward. So that would be my final thought, is to just do the crop first before you do any further editing, and then just see how it goes. Well, Dave, this was an awesome conversation, and I'm hoping that it sheds some good light on this whole concept of cropping for everybody that is new to it, and can't wait till we think of something else to talk to next time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's one of those things where sometimes you get the nice new toys and you want to talk about that, or some amazing new changes that they decide to add to the app. But sometimes it's nice just to take a step back and say, okay, let's go back to getting a little more grounded into just the basics and see where we can go from there.
Yeah, definitely. And we will definitely carry on with the basic stuff in the future. On what subject, who knows, but we'll come up with something, I'm sure. And on that note, Dave, tell everybody where they can find you.
Sure, you can find mostly photography related on Instagram, and photography and a little bit yelling and screaming related on Twitter is ProfPod, and on Facebook in the iPhoneography group is Dave Podner. Alrighty.
You can find me on Instagram at Macmillan Photo, on Twitter, Macmillan_photo. And I'm also in the Tiny Shutter Facebook group. You just look for us there. And you can find this podcast on iPhoneography.ca. And it's on the Apple Podcast app, iHeartRadio, just about anywhere where you can pick up a podcast feed. Right on the website, there's an RSS link where you can add that to your podcast player of choice. And the Artful iPhoneography community, where this podcast originated from, is on MeWe, but you can find it by going to artfulipc.club. We're about 80 members strong, and you can join the community and share your stuff there as well. If you're not on Facebook, that's a pretty good place to be. And we will be doing this show probably every 2 weeks, hopefully, if life doesn't get in the way. The last show that we did was just an open conversation with Matt Hoffman, Dave, and myself. And, just to recap, that was a bit of a therapy session for me because I suffered 2 losses in the week prior to that. And I just wasn't myself. And I'm just starting to come around now to wanting to actually get out and take some pictures. So, life's going on and the world's turning. The sun rises and sets as it does every day, and I'm doing much better. And we will see you all on the next one. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Craig. Have a great week.
Yeah, you too. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.